Welcome back, everybody, to JetBlue Park in Fort Myers, Florida. My name is Mike Petraglia, joined as always by Red Sox senior writer for WEEI.com, Alex Speier. Alex, begin today talking JBJ. That would be Jackie Bradley Jr. Last year, he really wowed him in spring training. He hit, I believe it was 442, somewhere in that neighborhood. Started 14 games, played in 25. Everybody and their brother, as I wrote on WEEI.com today, thought that he deserved a spot on the opening day roster. He was indeed at Yankee Stadium in the Bronx, but things did not turn out well in the first month of the season. He hit, I believe it was 2 for 31. He walked 6 times, but struck out 12 times. Talking to him today, he is a very mature man, trying to learn from what he experienced last year. And I think Jackie Bradley Jr., knowing Jacoby Ellsbury's no longer in center field, is ready for the opportunity, ready to seize that opportunity. You agree?
Well, adversity is one of the greatest teachers in player development. That's something that you hear a lot from baseball front office guys, people in player development. And Jackie Bradley Jr. is someone who had adversity last year. It was at the major league level, though. We often lose sight of that. I think that there was some sense that, oh, he's not what we thought he was. No. At the start of spring training last year, the expectation was that he was going to be competing for a role in either Portland or Pawtucket. Against that backdrop, his season was a wild success, even if it did have its hiccups. To me, the bigger question was the fact that he ended up having some injury issues over the course of the 2013 season in Pawtucket. But yes, he struggled in the major leagues, but in 3 different call-ups, he was able to accomplish different things and show a certain progression as he did move through the course of the season, to the point where in September he looked like he was ready to be put in this position to compete for a job. And in all likelihood it's his, but he will be, at the very least they haven't, that's not a fait accompli, because you're kind of curious to see what Grady Sizemore might be able to do in camp. But nonetheless, he's mature enough to understand that struggle is part of the growing process.
And that leads us to our next topic, and that is Grady Sizemore. You had an opportunity, Alex, to speak with him. I think, in just the conversations that I've been around Grady also today, and in talking with John Farrell, it seems like there might be a bit of a difference in how to read it. John Farrell told us today that there was no reason to expect that he wasn't ready for games. Indeed, he will play against Northeastern on Thursday afternoon in the spring training opener. But you talked to Grady Sizemore, and I think you get a little bit of a different feel.
Oh, I think that he feels like he's ready for games, and I think that he's pleasantly surprised. I think he's elated. For me, we don't know yet. It's going to take a broader sample of the spring to figure out what he is on the field. But, you have to appreciate what playing against a college team in an exhibition game means to Grady Sizemore right now. The thing first and foremost on his mind is how elated he is to be in position to, number 1, put on a uniform, and number 2, to be able to participate in games. This is something that it's been 2.5 years in the making. He's been sitting at home on his couch rehabbing, and he's been limited to watching games. So the idea that he's going to be able to participate, he feels physically like he's ready. He has no idea. He acknowledges that his timing is a work in progress, but fundamentally this is just an exciting moment for him.
He did indicate, though, to you and I believe to us as well, he didn't want to take on too much too soon. Those were his words to us. Is that the sense you get?
Sure, of course. He needs to measure. He needs to make sure that he doesn't try to drink water from a fire hose, after being too thirsty. And so that's the position that he's in. Nonetheless, there haven't been any physical setbacks. Thus far, the progression, I think, has exceeded the expectations of everyone. But, there does have to be some sense of caution with regards to the progression, just because of what he's coming from.
Obviously, we're talking about a month of spring training games, but do you really see a possibility where Grady Sizemore jumps from not having played since 2011 to winning the starting role in center field?
Anything is possible. The closest comparison I can think of in the last decade would be someone like Josh Hamilton, who had years off, and then all of a sudden he got Rule 5. He got taken in by the Reds in the Rule 5 draft, entering the 2006 season, I believe, and he tore it up, and he ended up being who he was, being
projected to be.
I don't know if he would ever be who he was projected to be, but he ended up being a superstar. I think that Sizemore is in a different boat. He's much older than Hamilton was at that phase of his career, but never, ever, ever doubt great athletes. They can do some extraordinary things, even with what we would anticipate being a considerable amount of rust. So is it real? Is it likely? Probably not. Is it possible? You can't dismiss it completely.
All right, let's stick in the outfield. And speaking of athletes who work on their body nonstop and really need to, Shane Victorino. John Farrell said today that he has had a couple of very productive days in terms of healing his body and trying to work his way back into regular baseball activity. Your sense of where Shane Victorino stands and how cautious or not cautious the Red Sox are being with him?
Well, the hand appears to be progressing fine after he had that thumb surgery in January. He's been progressing in terms of his hitting and what he's been able to do from the standpoint of taking flips and taking even a little bit of limited batting practice. But what John Farrell said was that they wanted to focus on strengthening his core. You'll remember that last year he had abdominal injuries and hip injuries and hamstring injuries and lower back injuries, which essentially are all kind of core injuries, and they're all kind of related to the same fundamental things. So they said, before we push too hard to get him in games, instead let's focus on just building up that area so that this region of his body that kind of presented a bit of vulnerability last year and raised questions at various points about his availability can be put in the best possible position to keep him on the field.
All right, on to the bullpen. We all know how lights out Koji Uehara was. He had one of the greatest single seasons any closer has ever had in Major League Baseball. I don't think that's hyperbole. I think that's just what it was. He recorded the final three outs of each of the clinching series in the Red Sox postseason march to the World Series title, but he is 38. And with that in mind, I'm sure the Red Sox would like to talk about some depth behind him in the event, A, like you mentioned to John Farrell today, he just needs a day off, or something comes up like was the case last year with Joel Hanrahan and Andrew Bailey. They went out and got Edward Mujica, 37 saves, and there also is another interesting possibility that John Farrell raised today. Talk about who that other closer might be behind Koji Uehara.
Well, it was interesting to hear Farrell say that kind of the alternatives might also include Andrew Miller. Something that's interesting both because it says a lot about how far Miller has come in his career. It says a lot about how highly they regard him even coming off this injury, that they would say, okay, he's someone who would be that kind of back end, that end line of defense consideration. But when you strike out 14 batters per 9 innings, I guess you can be considered for just about any role there exists.
All right, that is the situation here at JetBlue Park. The Red Sox pitchers did not throw live batting practice here on Tuesday. Instead, it was the Red Sox position players who took opportunity for their first batting practice session inside JetBlue Park here on the turf. All the position players taking about 4 rounds each of batting practice. Of course, the games get underway on Thursday. Northeastern in a 7-inning contest starts at 1:05. That'll be followed about a half hour later by another 7-inning contest. That'll be against the Boston College Eagles. We'll speak to you again on Wednesday. For Alex Speier, I'm Mike Petraglia at JetBlue Park with the Red Sox, WEEI.com.